You hear that? Can you hear Jim?
Wasting money on cures. Forgot how to fix myself. They say that time is free. Then why is it so precious? Oh, I'll save memories in my head, like Polaroids on walls. They remind you to look ahead. Time is running out. Time is running out. Lately I've lost my track. I've sailed the deeper seas, hoping to find something to bring back better times. Oh, I'll save memories in my head, like Polaroids on walls. They remind you to look ahead. But time is running out. 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 Time is running. Time is running out. Time is running out. What if my best days are over? They can't be over. They can't be over now. Time is running out. What if my best days are over? They can't be over now. Time is running out. Time is running out. Time is running out.
Okay, hi everybody, welcome. I have made it after 6 hours on the train from the north of England all the way back down to London, West London now. Finally made it. Thanks for your patience. We had to delay the live stream a little bit tonight. But we thought we'd just get together, get the Tutor 2 collective together for one last session. I've got a few bits of advice to work through in terms of paper 3, especially for AQA and EDXL. I'll just reinforce some really key points. I know people have been watching the videos over the weekend. Then we'll open it out to any particular questions you have. Can't guarantee to answer every question. We're not in the business of predicting topics and questions. That's a mug's game. I actually found predicting things really hard, especially what's likely to happen in the future. And then we'll have a few words at the end. This is our final session. I think together we've had about 30, is it over 30 live streams since before Easter? And the wonderful group has emerged, working hard, revising hard. Paper 1, paper 2 out of the way now. Paper 3 is tomorrow. By lunchtime tomorrow, for most of us, the economics will be over for this year. Obviously, paper 4 and paper 5 the week after, but that we'll leave that for another day. Okay, and people are saying, Jeff, you're going to miss us. I'm going to miss this group terribly. I won't try and get too emotional. I'll try and keep it together as best I can. Can I spend a few minutes on AQA first and then EDXL, and then we'll start to gather together the questions as they come in. We will have about 5 or 10 minutes for questions, and then if it's okay with you, 5-10 minutes for general chat and bants, as they say. So AQA obviously different. OCR, by the way, is pretty standard paper. OCR, it's synoptic. They can ask you micro and macro questions. AQA obviously slightly different to EDXL. Multiple choice. The advice from the examiner's report is work quickly and efficiently. Use that as your kind of warm up. Work your way quickly, efficiently through the MCQs. They use the MCQs basically to cover lots of topics. and each topic only covers one concept. So if you know what the concept is, it does make it easy. So work your way through those. Then obviously you've got the investigation section B. The 10-mark question, I've had some good advice, by the way, from colleagues teaching this today. You must use the named data. So a really key thing in AQA is to use the named data, what information, what evidence you're looking for before quoting the data. Please make sure that you make maximum use of the extracts, the charts and the tables. A lot of students tomorrow will miss out on application marks because they ignore the data. They're taking a data ignore paper. But you won't. You'll try and use the data and make sure you flag it up really well. Figure 1 shows, underline that twice. Chart B shows, underline that twice. Please, for AQA, you must do some calculations. The obvious ones are percentage changes or ratios, or working out an estimated trend of something, or the volatility, the range of data. So please include some data manipulation, a few calculations, and be aware of the limitations of data. How accurate is it? Is it official data? Is it real or nominal? Is it as a share of GDP? How accurate is the data you're likely to get? And as you're writing the 10 markers, make mini judgments along the way, plus your overall supported judgment. That's the 10-mark question. And then we get into the later questions. Next slide, I think, builds on this one. The evidence from last year, the people who took the paper in 2022, of course, the first paper since the COVID pandemic, make explicit use of the prompt. So they really focus on what the question is asking for. And often be key STEM words in the question. As with all examples, EDXL included chains of reasoning, logical chains of reasoning. They're looking for appropriate diagrams, be a massive difference to your paper. And if it's an explain question, you don't have to evaluate in a 15 marker. Explain means explain, okay? Then you get into the 25 marker. Key advice there from the examiners is not to go too data heavy, not to go too theory heavy. You need a nice balance between data and theory. My advice is to put some data into every paragraph if you can. Use accurate, well-labeled diagrams and evaluate throughout, perhaps at the end of a paragraph, reaching the final conclusion, of course, where you have to recommend a course of action based on what you've been asked to do. So that's AQA. And after, when you've put your pen down, well done. EDXL, which is my particular expertise. I'm sorry, I'm not an AQA expert, but EDXL 2-hour paper for those people without extra time or breaks and things. 2 questions, question 1, question 2, couldn't be simpler. Both compulsory, but you get a choice in the 25 markers for each. Now, it's crucial. This is really important, this next bit. It's marked out of 100. The raw mark is out of 100. Don't know what the grade boundaries are like to be, but I would think an A star is probably about 77, 78, 79, and A probably 68, 68, 69. But the paper is weighted to 30%. So EDXL students, you've already done 70% of your exam. Just going to finish it off tomorrow. The 2 questions, each has 5, 8, 12, 25. So they've taken out the 10 and the 15 from the data and just put in the 25 mark essay. The essay, question 1, typically, may change tomorrow, but typically question 1 is on micro from this year and last year. Question 2 typically is on macro. So you'd expect your micro questions for the 5, the 8, and the 12, then synoptic. And then your macro questions for question 2, 5, 8, 12, then your synoptic. Lots of people giving strange advice on this. For the 25 marker, all you need to do in the 25 markers is build a strong, solid micro KA point and then evaluate it, and 1 macro point and then evaluate it. You don't need 3, you certainly don't need 4, 2 well-developed KA paragraphs evaluated in turn, and then that final judgment is all you need for the 25 markers. Believe me, less is more. Depth is what they're looking for, along with good use of the data and good diagrams. I'll talk a little bit about how to conclude the 25 marker. Just moving on to the 25 mark question then. Next slide, I think, captures this for us here. Students are writing way too much for the 5 and the 8. So please don't mark a minute, absolute mark a minute. Don't forget, there's no section A tomorrow. So you can't really make up time with those easy multiple choice questions. Use of the context is vital for all questions, including the 25 marker. For the 5-mark question, you'll need 2 bits of data in the answer. You must use 2 bits of data. I use it in paper 1 and paper 2. 8 marks, don't write too much. 2 for knowledge, 2 for application, 2 for analysis, 2 for evaluation. Probably don't need a diagram for the 8 marker. You definitely need a diagram for the 12 marker. You need 2 KA points, 2 evaluation points. You need to go beyond 2 steps, 3 or 4 steps in the chain of reasoning. And you definitely need to evaluate in the 8, the 12, and the 25. And then we get on to the 25-mark question. By the way, the mark split, the time and mark split, I always think mark a minute. But you can barely go wrong if you do that on this paper. 2 25-mark questions. Now, they're each worth 25. Do the maths, that's 50. So it's half the exam. And given that the exam is worth 30% of your 2 essays tomorrow will be worth 15% of your A-level. So they really do matter. I'll go as far as to say the last question you write tomorrow, hopefully it's the 25-mark on question 2. The last question you write, will be the one that determines your grade. No pressure. But you've got to get to that 25-mark question and give yourself the time. So please give yourself at least 30 minutes for the last 25 marker. You have to be ruthless, relentless, focused on the clock. Don't overwrite on the 5 and the 8. Now, typically, the questions are synoptic, and they ask you for about micro and macro. I would always write my answer in that order. Micro, evaluate, macro, evaluate. Could be influences or causes. Could be effects or impact or consequences. Could be policies. Could be causes, effects, and policies. You just have to get ready for what, as Russell Crowe famously said, whatever comes through those doors, we have to do it together. Obviously, you can't do it together in the exam on your own, but just be prepared for each aspect. 25-mark question is a 5-paragraph answer. You must use the context. Please use the context in each paragraph, bit of application in each paragraph. And you cannot get a good mark without applying it. If you miss out the data, you'll mess up the paper. Okay, so please put data in your answer. Not a lot, just 1 bit of data per paragraph. Final paragraph, everybody, well, what do I write? Well, which cause, micro, macro, is most significant? Which effect is most significant? Which policy might be most effective? So you can challenge and question the significance of what you've written. It's a good way to finish. Or challenge an assumption in your analysis. Or if you want to say something fresh, say, well, look, I haven't talked about this policy, but I think in the long run, this other policy might work in tandem or in combination. You can bring in anything you like, as long as you're referring back to the question. So please do refer to the question in your final paragraph. Just avoid starting that final paragraph with 2 useless words to conclude. Because to conclude normally means I'm going to say the same things again. You've got to try and say something a little different and just develop the argument a little bit. Okay, so that's the 25 markers. Just very quickly on what to write about. Micro, macro. Micro, anything to do with market prices. That includes consumer surplus, producer surplus. Anything to do with market outputs, so price, output, and profit. And so there was not much, for example, at EDXL on cost, revenue, and profit curves, was there in paper 1? So you may be, I think you'll be using cost revenue curves tomorrow. Pretty certain you will be. And there wasn't much on externalities, wasn't much on environmental market failure. So definitely revise your market failures and your cost and revenue curves tonight. Market structures, you need to go back over your market structures. Inefficiency, dynamic, allocative, productive. Competition, you can always talk about contestability there. Labour markets is micro, and externalities, market failures are all micro. Macro sides, always say this to my students, you can't go wrong if you go back to your macro objectives: jobs, growth, inflation, trade, aspects of development, changing structure of the economy, inequality, relative poverty, and the fiscal side of things: government debt, government spending, government borrowing. So it might be a little, take a screenshot or something, but those are micro, macro. And in your 25 markers in particular, don't allow too much macro to seep into the micro, and vice versa. AQA, you can blend a little bit more. You can blend the micro and the macro a little bit more together to good effect, particularly in the final concluding statement. We have to make that recommendation. Maria says, are supply side policies micro policies? Well, they come into macro. I think Maria's right. Most supply side policies actually seek to operate on the micro side. Privatization, contestable markets, etc. A lot of supply side policies have micro foundations, which is quite interesting. Okay, Harry says tomorrow is going to be a labour markets question, I guarantee it. Well, Harry, can't guarantee it, but you've got to revise labour markets for tomorrow because it's one of the great synoptic topics. And we've actually done 3 live streams on labour markets because it's one of those, it's the most important market in the whole economy, in my opinion. So I hope for a labour market question tomorrow. You can't guarantee it. It might come up paper 4, paper 5, paper 6, maybe paper 12 in the middle of August. Now, when it comes to grade boundaries, everybody, please, can we just agree as a group not to talk about grade boundaries? The thing about exams is the grade boundaries are determined by how the students have done. Okay, so the better you do tomorrow, to keep a nice, clean, sensible, relentless approach, you'll go up the grade boundaries. Every extra mark, a better diagram, nice bit of use of data, good contextual example, a little bit of evaluation, which is spot on. Everything you do tomorrow is about adding to your mark. And it's insane, by the way. Every small improvement in what you do lifts you up the grade boundaries because grade boundaries are quite tight, they're quite narrowly focused, and the average standard is not very good, whereas the average quality of people in this group is exceptionally high. So I think the key to preparation is to revise well, be smart, so that you lift the average of your mark and you reduce the standard deviation based on what comes out tomorrow. Okay, so rule of thumb for most papers is mark a minute. Let's take a few questions. We've got nearly 1,000 people in the live chat, which is amazing. So let's try and take a few questions, and then we'll have a little finish together. Rohan says, Jeff, how do you avoid being generic about the macro objectives? Well, you go beneath the surface. Let me give you an example of that. If there's a question tomorrow on unemployment, you can talk about, pardon me, I'm just going to on the train all day. You can talk about falling unemployment, rising unemployment. I'd be looking, Rohan, at long-term unemployment, youth unemployment, regional unemployment, economic inactivity, employment rates, that kind of stuff. So just going beneath the surface, one of my great colleagues says you disaggregate. Unemployment it's a big number, but if you just go beneath the surface, you find some really interesting stuff. Okay, and that's how you avoid being generic. Instead of just talk about inflation rising and falling, you talk about cost push, demand pull, talk about stagflation, talk about profit push inflation, bringing in the Phillips curve. You can find that nice way of avoiding being generic, if that answers your question. Jim, by the way, will be popping up at the end of the session to say hello. We decided to release him. Here's George, one of our great contributors. George, Jeff, do you have some tips for nerves? It's making me feeling a little rough, paralyzed by worrying over papers I've already done and papers yet to come. Well, there is no way to avoid this. Exams are stressful. My tip, George, you may not probably do this, but let me tell you a story. When I did my finals at Cambridge 312 years ago, 37 years ago, I used to walk to the exam hall the night before, and I just used to walk. It was about a mile to the exam hall, have a walk, get some fresh air. I'd do a few stretches, whatever it was. Think through what I was about to face. I'd go home, have a cup of tea or something nice, something refreshment to drink, and just go to sleep. Sleep's the best cure for nerves. I know you might wake up feeling nervous, but you just do the best you can. Let's be clear here. Some of the answers I've seen in the live chat and the live streams over the last 2 or 3 months, and we do things slightly differently to other more popular YouTubers, but the quality of the answers and the insight and the awareness and just the accuracy of the stuff is staggeringly high. I mean, it's brilliantly high. So you'll be fine, George. Strong advice: if you think you've done too much, take a break. Just get some sleep, go for a walk, and you'll be fine. And hopefully you'll get the grades you need to go to that amazing course and college that you have in front of you. Anwar says, how do you weigh up micro versus macro at the conclusion? Yeah, good point. Actually, well, of course, you've made one micro. Is this AQA, ANWR, or EDXL? Helpful, by the way, questions if you put the exam board. It's up to you, really. Depends what the question is. I was just thinking of some questions today on the train. Assess the micro and macro policies that might be effective in the UK achieving net zero. That's carbon policies. Well, clearly at a macro level, you need the right tax systems, you need the interest rates, you need the government to be able to fund these things. So there's big macro stories. But a lot of it's micro. It's how many businesses install heat pumps. It's how many firms install electric chargers. It's how many households, what have you, are able to afford insulation. You just have to come to a view. And as long as you come to a reasoned view in your exam and maybe support it with an argument, you'll be fine. There's no right or wrong answer in a synoptic paper. Another question coming up on the screen. Here we go. EDXL, how many chains should you do per paragraph for 25 marker? My instinct, Eloise, is somewhere it's 4 or 5 links in the chain is fine. Particularly if you're then supporting with a bit of data, and a diagram, of course, can really help. So draw the diagram first and then refer to it in your chain of reasoning. So I reckon 4 and 5 links. It's just not feasible to write 7 or 8 links in the time you have. This exam tomorrow is time pressured. It's the most time pressured of all the papers. And so therefore you have to be smart. 4 to 5 links, nice connective phrases, use of hedging words, good diagrams, use the data, you'll be fine. I reckon a paragraph for, let's say, 6 or 7 lines is normally more than enough. Okay, it's 25 marks, isn't it? If you write 30 lines with a diagram, it's almost like a marker line. Thank you. So, Jeff, would you suggest starting with a 25 mark if you struggle with timing? No. I would always do the exam in the order in which the questions are shaped and framed. Read the extracts first, highlight them first. I'd always go 5, 8, 12, 25. A load of people say, should I go for 25 first? You can if you want. I just wouldn't. I'd want to get my 5 in my head out of the way, smash the 12 marker in 12 minutes, give myself 30 minutes for the essay. Rinse and repeat, go again. The trouble with doing the 2 25s is you haven't really warmed up. The 5 and the 8 are designed as little warm-up questions to get you going. So I do them in the order. Somebody was saying, here's more questions. Can you be synoptic for smaller questions? No. If this is EDXL, more, no. You leave the synopticity to the 25 markers. So question 1, the first 3 questions will typically be micro, 5, 8, 12. Question 2, the first 3 questions will typically be macro, 5, 8, 12. And then they bring in the synoptic bit at the end. In fact, you can make a case for saying this is not really a synoptic paper. Most of the questions tomorrow will either be micro or macro. There's only 2 questions on the EDXL paper which are micro and macro at the same time. Bruno had a nice question about financial. If we find Bruno's point, one of our great contributors, one of our amazing students, is financial instability a negative consequence of income inequality? Yes, is the answer. What we found out is that, it takes you beyond A level, but the financialization of the economy, the ability of lots of financial providers to target low income households in search of yield. Obviously, subprime mortgages was a really good example of that, selling mortgages to people who had a poor credit history. Subprime lending in other ways, doorstep lending, unsecured credit, that kind of stuff. Undoubtedly, I think you can make a case for saying that was the case. The financial instability was a consequence of inequality. On the train, I was finishing off my good friend Linda Yu's new book. There we go, The Great Crashes. Can you see that? The Great Crashes, which is a study of financial instability. Top book, one for the beach when the exam's over. Nathan says, do we need to know the Libor scandal? The answer is yes for financial markets, because it's a good example of market rigging. Marcel says, can you suggest learning your application for paper 3? Oh, really good question, Marcel. Thank you for that. there is no new stuff you need to revise for tomorrow, everybody. You don't need to revise anything new for tomorrow. The revision you did for paper 1 and paper 2 will be absolutely fine for tomorrow. You just have to get yourself into a nice, clean, clear state. And tomorrow, critically, you have to make really good use of the data provided in the charts, the tables, and the extracts. So don't go looking for extra applications. Don't need it. You've done the work. I think many of you will have spent half term maybe just refreshing and topping up your paper 1, paper 2 revision. Just take everything into play tomorrow and do your best. Luke says, should we try and include our own knowledge as much as we can in 25 markers? Luke, I'd probably go 80-20 there. I think what the examiners are really hoping for you to do is to use the data from the extracts. But you will always be credited if you can show off a little bit with some extra awareness. Maybe you've revised a country, for example, and it's not the country that came up. So you will be credited the 25 marker, but please don't bring it in necessarily in the 5, the 8, and the 12, because they want you to use the data. That's why it's called data response, as opposed to data ignore. Thanks for that question, Luke. Ethan says, when I evaluate, I always feel that macro is more significant impacts the whole economy. Is this a bad way to go about it? No. And Ethan, I go further, actually, often this interconnected nature of countries, isn't it? So if you've revised globalization, macro events in one country can cause shocks, external shocks in other countries. So that's an interesting feeling. Although you can reverse that a little bit, Ethan, by saying that macroeconomic events can have a significant, there's an asymmetry in terms of the impact on different industries. So what's happening, for example, in the gas industry or whatever, or the energy price sector, what's happening in the oil market affects logistics companies, transport companies more than it does, whatever, food retailers. So that's fine, it's all good. Another question coming in. Jim's doing a great job, by the way, in our cellar. Lewis says, how can you link income inequality to market failure? Well, great question, Lewis. I do have a video on the links between income inequality and market failure. Essentially, my argument is that income inequality is a market failure, and if it leads to externalities. So income inequality can be linked, particularly in low-income countries, to a lack of education and healthcare and housing and nutrition, which have significant external costs. And you have to think about deforestation in Brazil or Indonesia, tragedy of the commons off the east coast of Africa. Deep inequality and poverty can have significant social costs. Another question coming through. How long should we spend on the extracts, as in reading and highlighting? Great question, Magnus. Well, I would reckon, again, AQA, you have to really go through the extracts. EDXL, likewise. I'd say give yourself 5 minutes per question to highlight. It is 5 minutes well spent, because you'll pick out some data. I'm going to use that bit of data. That's a good argument. Here's a bit of the chart I can use. Those 5 minutes will save you 5 minutes later on, because you won't have to go back to the extracts. You've already picked them out. So you have to really get the old highlighters and the pens working over time, and you can then do that. Okay, how are we doing? Another question. Any tips for managing mind blanks in the exam? I often just forget basic things. Well, this happens in exams. People hit a wall. Just going to keep a steady hand, a steady focus. Don't worry. Tip is to leave the odd line, 2 lines at the end of each paragraph, Ash. And if it comes back to you, you've got space at the end of the paragraph to add in your point. So if it's a general mind blank, well, you're just going to take a deep breath, have a drink of water and move on. So maybe leave 2 or 3 lines between paragraphs, if that makes sense. So you can recover and add stuff in towards the end if you have time. Lauren says, how would you add a cost curve into your answer? Well, Lauren, depends on what the context is, of course. But for example, I think I did a question yesterday, assess the micro and macro effects of a rise in fuel prices, which would shift marginal and average costs for lots of companies. So you just got to show changing cost curves and how it affects firms' prices and profits. Another question coming up. Ben, any reasons why microfinance may not have been as successful? Well, loads of reasons. Partly, it's been very hard to scale it up, actually. Pardon the pun, but this has proved difficult to really scale up microfinance. And also there's been a lot of issues to do with high interest rates, fairly poor regulation of the microfinance sector. There was a BBC World Business report on Sri Lanka microfinance just a couple of weeks back, which was quite damning in many ways. Don't worry too much about it, Benji. I think the key thing is that interest rates were never that low, and there have been some major issues with the lack of regulation and linked to pretty poor behaviour by lenders. George says, if microfinance comes up, I'll be dancing. Well, I'm sure we want to see that. How are we doing for time, everybody? Conscious that we seem to be still very busy. Yeah, Jay says 2 years of hard work over tomorrow. I'm absolutely right. 2 years of very hard work. And hopefully you'll get the benefits in the autumn. Cameron says, is paper 3 just everything else that wasn't in the other 2 papers? Well, not everything, but typically they try to use paper 3 as a way of bringing in more topics. They have to cover enough number of topics and issues across all 3 papers. They have to do that. And they try to do that with paper 1 and paper 2 with the multiple choice. AQA, OCR have multiple choice in tomorrow's paper. So that's another good way of them asking lots of shorter questions, which basically provides them with that synopticity. Okay, just thinking along a few lines here, would you say a diagram for each point in the 25 marker? EDXL, and I would say yes. Maybe 1 micro diagram and 1 macro diagram would make a lot of sense to me if you have time. And hopefully we'll have time. Harry says, Jeff, does paper 3 EDXL have any quantitative skills? Yes. I think the 5 marker may well have some quantitative skills involved. Or you have to do a calculation or put in some data. But there won't be to the same extent as you had in paper 1 and paper 2 with some tables and stuff to calculate. Okay, folks, got time. I think we've got for another 5 minutes or 10 minutes or so. Jim will pick out some questions. Sanket, are we allowed to make a macro point on the 8? Okay, even a question. Well, yes. Okay, so Sanket, really good point. Question 1 tomorrow at EDXL will be mainly micro. That's what certainly been the case in all the papers so far. Question 2 would be mainly macro. So question 1 will have a micro focus. Question 2 will have a macro focus. But it's only in the 25 marker that you need to produce a synoptic answer. So the 5, the 8, and the 12 will be micro. The 5 and the 8 and the 12 in question 2 will be macro. They bring the synoptic bit in to the 25 marker. Okay. Or what's the best way to write a judgment paragraph? Yeah, okay. Judgment, I mean, again, Noah, I think, thanks for your question, by the way, and thanks for your contributions over the last 3 months. It's been amazing. You don't have to write a long answer, by the way, in the final section. So providing you can write a really good answer in 5 or 6 lines, just by challenging the assumptions you've made, for example, or by saying, well, in my opinion, on balance, I think the best way to achieve carbon net zero, for example, will be to focus at a microeconomic level in the long run by incentivizing firms and households to invest at a small scale in heat pumps, home insulation, scaling up electric vehicles, etc. Whereas the macroeconomics depends so much what happens to the world price of oil, for example, what happens to corporation tax. So you just have to just do a little bit of calibration, a little bit of balancing, a bit of reasoning. What do you think is the most important point, micro or macro? And just come to a view. And then just, once you've made that view, just explain it. Just justify your view. So you don't have to write a long answer. It could be 5, 6, 7 lines maximum. It's just bringing an essay to an end. And of course, it's a bit of the last thing you write in economics, Noah. So make it a really good paragraph and go well. What else have we got here? May we have a pun to improve the mood at EDXL? Well, funny you should say that, Rosetta, but a pun. my students got me Jeff's book of jokes. I think it was last year, and some of them are absolute crackers.
Is it empty?
It is empty. Yep. What have we heard? Oh yeah, people who've never played blindfold darts, Jim. They don't know what they're missing. Absolute cracker. I shot a 66 the other week. It was a 9-hole golf course. I'm going to a deodorant party next weekend. Roll on Saturday. And working as a sleep analyst, that would be my dream job. Now, if you've got any other better jokes, maybe put them in the comment section. Oh yeah, did I tell you I went to a new restaurant in Windsor last night? It was called Karma. Have you been there?
Yeah, well, I think. Well, I have after you did this pun on the live stream on Friday. I think because you used it then. And I think you also used it the week before. So yeah, don't you pay what you? Don't they pay what you get, or you get what you pay for, or something like that?
I'll do the punchline. No, there's no menu. You just get what you deserve. Okay, folks, here we go. Alex says he lives in Windsor. Oh, wow. Sam says, rumor has it that Jeff was the risk manager at Lehman Brothers. Yes, Sam, you've probably seen those. Videos of me walking out with boxes of files and things, looking crestfallen and forlorn as I lose my job. Rosetta says Jeff's running out of jokes. Very quickly in the chat, Oliver says, "Sold my vacuum cleaner." Yeah, she's gathering dust. Really good one. Yeah. Sorry, by the way, Jim has made an appearance every week. Can we please give Jim a shout out in the chat window?
It's already happened, Jeff. You're just a bit behind.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I want a quite big delay here, really. Sorry about that. Jim, what do you think? What do you think about the last few months? It's been amazing, hasn't it? Incredible.
Well, I mean, to be honest with you, it's been. I've not just been astonished at how many live sessions you and John and Penny and the rest of the team have done, which have just been amazing. Okay. The sheer depth of coverage of topics and data taken together, it's just been an amazing program. But to see so many people who've joined us, for so many of them, and not just joined us, but contributed in the live chat. I think there's been a couple of features that have really struck me, which I've not seen before. And we've been doing these for 2 or 3 years now. One is how often the live chat participants have been supporting each other, both with answers and also, generally supporting each other emotionally and, wrapping an arm around people who maybe have been a bit stressed out and a bit anxious, which has been amazing. But then the level of answers, the level of responses, and apologies, I've done my best to try to get as many as I can on screen, and but it's the devil's own job to get a nice range because there's so many high quality responses. It was great to meet lots of you at the workshops, Jacob and others, but I feel as though I've got to know and we've got to meet you via the live streams as well. So those are my observations as we close in on the final paper.
Yeah, I think so. Totally. It's incredible. We do this for fun because we actually enjoy teaching. Strange, isn't it? People actually enjoy teaching. But it's been absolutely incredible. Jacob's tearing up over here. Well, I think Jacob came to one of our live streams and managed to get a beanie or something, one of those little bits of merch. I think the key thing really is don't go well tomorrow. Go well tomorrow. I think you've done so much work for these first 2 papers. As I say, you don't need any extra revision for paper 3. You just have to really just focus on the particular skills of the paper. And in 2 hours' time, or 11 o'clock, or whatever it is, 11:30 tomorrow, you'll be able to come out and having given your best in A-level economics. And it's a hard A-level. It's not easy. Lots of people, there's lots of BS around at times. What we've tried to do in this group, in these sessions, is focus on the economics, focus on the analysis, the evaluation, the application. Can we do? Hans says, truly the end of an era. Good luck to you all. Absolutely fantastic. I tell you what's really amazing. In the summer, in middle of August, when the results come out, if you have a good result, if you have a good day, if you take a moment to post a message, it is just so much fun and so rewarding when people get back to us and say, actually, I've got my place to read history at Manchester. I'm going off to JP Morgan to start my degree apprenticeship. Whatever you go on to, it's all very, very exciting. It's partly the best part of teaching, isn't it? To find people be super excited about what people then end up doing. Rosetta, thank you very much for your message. You really are very, very kind. I don't know if you know this, by the way, but I should be moving more or less full time to in the autumn, doing a lot of traveling, presenting and broadcasting, but you'll all be moving on. Will says, never thought I'd say this. I miss revising for my A-levels. Yeah, absolutely. And critically, will some of you be humming that tune on the way to the exam tomorrow morning? Be humming it.
Wasting money on cures. Forgot
Got it
how
on
to
the-
fix myself.
Got it on my Spotify playlist.
They say
Most importantly, stay together, everybody. You'll be fine tomorrow. You'll be absolutely fine. Do your best. That's all anybody who supports you can ask. Stay happy, stay healthy, stay curious, and we all hope to see you again sometime soon. Take care.
Cheers, everyone.